Welcome to Conspiracy Q, listeners. Tonight's top secret investigation. Well, it's one for the ages, folks. We're diving deep into a question that's haunted scholars and, let's be honest, conspiracy theorists for centuries. Was William Shakespeare really the guy behind those brilliant plays and poems? Or are we looking at, perhaps, history's greatest literary hoax?
Yeah, I mean, the official story, right? That's a nice, neat little package. Glovemaker's son from Stratford becomes the biggest literary star England's ever seen. But what if, and stay with me here, what if it's a giant cover-up? What if Shakespeare was a friend? Or maybe even like a team of writers using one name?
That's what our sources, some recently declassified, are suggesting. Let me tell you, they paint a pretty compelling picture of a, well, let's call it Operation Quill Drop cover-up, a conspiracy to hide the real author or authors. We're going to break it down, folks. First, we'll look at the Stratford man himself. Genius, maybe, unlikely genius, definitely possible.
Exactly. We'll dig into the works themselves, the plays and poems. Are there clues hidden in plain sight? And then the big why. If there was a cover act, what was the point? Why all the secrecy?
So buckle up, listeners. This one's a doozy. Let's start with Mr. William Shakespeare of Stratford. That's how his name appears in a lot of records, by the way. Shakspere. And right off the bat, there's something fishy. Our sources point out there's basically zero proof he ever got a proper education.
Right. We're talking about the Stratford Grammar School. Oh, no records of him being there, no enrollment, no attendance, nothing. And even if we give the traditionalists the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, maybe he went, well, grammar school back then was pretty basic. They mainly hammered Latin grammar.
Right, basic Latin. But then you read the plays, and it's like, whoa, this guy knew everything. I mean, deep knowledge of classical literature, ancient history, the rhetoric, the way he uses language to persuade. It's masterclass stuff. And then legal terms. Our sources highlight this, how accurate and detailed his legal references are.
It's like he went to law school. But there's no record of that either. And on top of the legal stuff, there are entire scenes in other languages. French, Italian, you name it. It makes you wonder, where did all this knowledge come from? If it wasn't from schooling, then where?
It's a great question. And it gets even weirder when you look at what's called the lost years.
Yes.
7 years, folks, from 1585 to 1592. William Shakespeare basically disappears from history. Poof, gone.
Exactly. Vanished. No records, no letters, no anything. The usual explanations are, well, pretty thin. Holding horses outside theaters? Maybe. Joined a traveling acting troupe? Possibly. But there's nothing concrete to back any of it up.
And here's the kicker. These lost years. That's when the first Shakespeare plays start popping up, like Henry VI. Parts of it, anyway. So this guy, no previous writing experience that we know of, just suddenly becomes a master playwright. I mean, come on, that's a huge leap, isn't it?
It's a bit of a head-scratcher, for sure. How does that kind of talent just appear out of nowhere? It just doesn't add up.
Right. It's like winning the lottery without buying a ticket. Now let's talk about the paper trail, or the lack of it. Because here's the thing. We've got tons of documents about Shakespeare from Stratford. Yeah. Legal papers, property deeds, even lawsuits over, like, small debts. The guy loved a good lawsuit, it seems. Tax records, marriage license, baptism, burial, all there.
So we know he existed. We know he was a businessman. We know he owned property.
Exactly. But when it comes to his writing life, it's like crickets. Where are the manuscripts, the letters about his work, correspondence with other writers, theater people, anything?
You'd think a guy writing as much as Shakespeare would leave behind some kind of paper trail.
Right. Not even a shopping list for ink and quills. And the will. Don't even get me started on the will. It's super detailed. Mentions his property, his rings, even his second-best bed. But books, plays, poems, not a word. You telling me the greatest writer in the English language didn't care about his own work?
It is strange. You would think those things would be his most prized possessions.
Right. It's like a chef leaving all his knives and pots to someone else and saying, nah, cooking wasn't really my thing. Makes no sense, right? Oh. Then there are the signatures. We've got 6 of them, all on legal documents. And they're all over the place, different spellings of his own name, shaky handwriting. It's like he was barely literate.
It is a pretty stark contrast. The guy who supposedly wrote these beautiful flowing sonnets couldn't even sign his name consistently.
Right. And you compare his signatures to guys like Ben Jonson, other writers from that time. Their handwriting is beautiful, consistent. It's like they wrote for a living, Right. Which, they did. And finally, there's the whole Stratford versus the world thing. The plays are full of details about Italy, France, Denmark, all over. Court life, palaces, travel, works. But Shakespeare, as far as we know, never left England.
Stratford was a small town, not exactly a hub of international culture and sophistication.
Yeah, more like a hub of, well, sheep and farming. So how did this guy know so much about other countries, about royal courts and high society?
It does make you wonder if he really had the experiences to write about those things so vividly.
Okay, so we've got a guy with questionable education, no writing samples, shaky signatures, and a very limited view of the world. Not exactly screaming literary genius,
Yeah.
right? But let's move on to the works themselves. Because our sources say the plays and poems, they might actually be crying out for a different author.
One thing that jumps out is how the plays treat different social classes. The nobles, they're complex, sympathetic. The commoners, not so much. They're either comic relief or, easily manipulated mobs.
Exactly. And that's interesting because if Shakespeare was this guy from a humble background, you'd think he'd be more on the side of the common people.
Right. It makes you wonder if the author was someone who actually lived among the aristocracy, understood their world from the inside.
That's a good point. And then there's the legal stuff again. I mean, it's not just a few random terms here and there.
Yeah.
We're talking deep, accurate knowledge of the law, procedures, precedents, the whole 9 yards.
It's been pointed out by a lot of legal scholars. It goes way beyond what someone like Shakespeare, even with his little lawsuits, would know.
Right. And that's where our sources bring up Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
He was a big deal back then. Lawyer, philosopher, politician, super smart guy. And guess what? He knew the law inside and out.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Could Bacon have been the real Shakespeare, or at least one of the real Shakespeares?
Now, this next part, that's a little out there, even for Conspiracy Q. We're talking about hidden codes and ciphers in the works. For centuries, some folks have been saying there are secret messages in the plays and poems pointing to other authors.
Like Bacon, yeah. Or Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford. He's another popular candidate.
Now, look, I know this sounds crazy, and most scholars, they think it is crazy. They say it's just people seeing what they want to see. But here's the thing. There are a lot of these supposed codes and ciphers.
It's hard to dismiss all of them as just coincidence.
Right. I mean, what if the real author, or authors, deliberately left these clues behind, like a message in a bottle, waiting for someone to find it? It's kind of cool, actually, when you think about it.
It does add another layer of intrigue to the whole mystery.
Right. And then there's the fact that some of the plays, they just don't feel consistent, like they were written by different people or maybe revised a lot over time, which, makes sense if you think about it. If there was a group of writers using the Shakespeare name, that would explain why the style and quality change sometimes.
It's a good theory. And it would have been easier to keep the secret that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the big question, why? Why go through all the trouble of creating this fake Shakespeare? Our sources suggest a few reasons. First, being a playwright back then, especially for a high-class person, it wasn't exactly, respectable. It was considered low-class entertainment.
Yeah. It wasn't like being a poet or a scholar. It was more like, I don't know, being a juggler or something.
Exactly. Not something a nobleman would want their name attached to. So if someone like Bacon or Oxford wanted to write plays, they'd need a front man, someone to take the heat, so to speak.
And it would protect their reputation. They could still write, but without the social stigma.
Exactly. And then there's the political angle. Some of the plays are pretty edgy, dealing with kings being overthrown, corruption, stuff like that.
Not exactly the kind of topics you want to be writing about if you're worried about upsetting the wrong people.
Yeah, could get you in some serious trouble. And our sources point out that Oxford, he was actually close to the Queen. Imagine the scandal if he'd been caught writing plays criticizing the monarchy.
A pseudonym would have been essential in that case, a way to express those ideas without risking his neck.
Right. So we've got the social stigma, the political risks, and then there's what I like to call the Shakespeare Inc. theory. The idea that maybe it wasn't one person, but a whole group of writers working together under one name, like a secret society of playwrights.
I like that, Shakespeare Inc. It makes sense, though, right? It would explain the sheer volume of work and the different styles we see in the plays.
Yeah. And Shakespeare from Stratford could have been their manager, their public face. It would have been a great way to make money and keep their identities secret. Now let's talk about the missing evidence, because here's another weird thing. We have almost nothing from Shakespeare's contemporaries describing him as a writer.
It's true. You'd think the greatest writer of his age would have left a bigger impression on the people who knew him.
Right. But it's all very vague. No one really talks about his writing process, his personality, anything like that. And a lot of the so-called evidence linking him to the plays, it didn't appear until after he was dead.
Like the first folio. That was published 7 years after he died. And it was a big deal. It basically established him as the author.
Yeah, but it was put together by his friends, so who knows what they added or changed. Maybe they were part of the cover-up, too. And then there's Christopher Marlowe. He was another playwright, a really good one, but he died young, supposedly in a bar fight.
A suspicious bar fight, some say.
Right. And guess what? Just a few weeks after he dies, the first work published under Shakespeare's name appears. It's a poem called Venus and Adonis. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Marlowe faked his death and started writing as Shakespeare.
It's a popular theory. And it does make you wonder if there was more to Marlowe's death than meets the eye.
Right. And then there's Oxford again. He died in 1604. And after that, the Shakespeare plays, they kind of change. They get darker, more somber, and there are fewer of them, almost like the main writer had died and someone else is trying to fill his shoes.
That's a point a lot of the Oxfordians make. They say the change in style is pretty obvious.
Right, and it fits the timeline. Oxford dies, and the Shakespeare output changes. And here's the final piece of the puzzle. Neither Shakespeare nor Oxford left behind any personal papers. No letters, no drafts, no notebooks, nothing.
You'd think they would have saved that stuff. It would be worth a fortune today.
Right. It's like they vanished into thin air. Which makes you wonder, was someone trying to erase the evidence? Did they destroy those papers to keep the secrets safe?
It's possible. If there was a cover-up, destroying the evidence would be a logical next step.
So what's the truth, folks? Was William Shakespeare from Stratford really the genius behind Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, all those amazing plays? Or was it someone else? Or even a group of people?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries, and we may never know for sure. But the evidence we've looked at tonight, it definitely casts doubt on the traditional story.
It does. There are just too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. The lack of education, the missing years, the missing manuscripts, the style changes in the plays, it's all very suspicious.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle, and some of the pieces just don't fit.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so fascinating. Maybe we'll never know for sure who really wrote Shakespeare. But that doesn't mean we can't keep searching for the truth. Because, as they say, the truth is out there. And sometimes, it's hidden in plain sight. So listeners, keep your eyes open, question everything, and always remember rate and follow Conspiracy Q to share the truth. We'll see you next time on Conspiracy Q for another deep dive into the mysteries of history.